Hello, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Swarm Talk. My name is Bryce Koon, and we're live again here on a Thursday evening. If you're watching along with us on Twitter, we're back there, by the way, and you'll notice a little blue check mark next to us. You got to do certain things for Elon for him to let you go live, and we're not proud to be taking part in the things that Elon's making us do, but we're going to have to do it. So that's what we have to do. But hey, we're live. We're talking Georgia Tech, and this is a fun episode as we take a look and a preview at the quarterback room. And one that I think a lot of people are going to want to hear about, a lot of people are going to want to talk, and it's going to be a lot of fun as well. Got a couple comments from people just way early on today. This one at 4:25 this afternoon. Clayton, yes, he will. That's all he says. John Burns says Georgia Tech has the strongest room in the ACC, and then he goes, yes, he will as well. So that answers obviously the big question that a lot of people want to know. You know, hey, was he going to take the next step? And we're going to take a look at that. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here tonight and talk about the room as a whole, as Georgia Tech is just, I believe, 16 days away from kicking off in Ireland against Florida State. We're going to have our full team preview and obviously get into our week 0 will be kind of the first official week that we really kind of dive into everything that's going on with Georgia Tech football. So, hey, it's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like the button. And if you're listening on podcast form, make sure you follow us over there as well. Without further ado, it's Swarm Talk, brought to you by the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
All right, so we're live here, and we've got just things happening in the background of the show, but that's a good reason why Ralph is not here. Coffee Killer says, evening, sir, and welcome in. Before we get started here tonight, I want to go ahead and let you know, presenting sponsor of all of our Georgia Tech shows for the 2024 season and hopefully beyond, it will be Section 103. What a comment down there. I'm not going to get to that quite yet, but I will. Section 103, you have to check out what they've got going on. The best gear you're going to find on the market if you're a Georgia Tech fan. It's phenomenal. It's comfortable. It's good for cold weather, good for warm weather, and you can use code Crowded Booth for 10% off your first order. And I would say it's probably the best fan-made gear that you can find on the market. With one that Adidas kind of drops the ball, no pun intended, but you can see right there, St. John Days, he likes it, former Georgia Tech great. And so make sure you check out Section 103. They do great stuff. It's going to be good stuff. Jack, for the first question of the evening, he goes, Bryce, do you drink your whiskey clear? The Jolly Good Fellows are wondering. If you don't know who the Jolly Good Fellows are, you got to check them out. Jack's a good fellow. He's a good guy. Jack, I'll tell you this. Tailgate, August 31st for the Georgia Tech football game. We're going to be there. We're going to be doing a show, myself, Will Manis, and Ralph Leary, live on campus, and then we're going to be enjoying the game with a lot of people. Make sure you stop by. Details to come. And, Jack, you might be able to figure out the answer to that. Andy does say that if the O-line improves, he says it will, King feels less pressure and plays better. Done deal. Andy, I would argue, Georgia Tech was really good in allowing sacks category last year, and I don't know. I mean, they can get better, obviously. But if they do, I don't know. It's kind of a catch-22. But tonight we're going to talk a little bit about this quarterback room in general. We're going to talk Haynes King. We're going to talk 2024 outlook, but we're going to talk about the room and the depth. And one of the reasons I think it is one of the more talented rooms in terms of what you can bring to the table in the ACC. Now, look, the ACC has some good quarterbacks in it this year. I famously a couple months ago did not put Haynes King in the top 4 or top 5 of the quarterbacks in the ACC. I want to see how he does in year 2, and if year 1 is just a flash in the pan type of year. Those are all valid questions. You might not like it, but I think that's kind of where we sit with Haynes King and kind of his development, which is point number 1. Look, I'm going to read to you an article that came out on a Georgia Tech website, a fan site. We'll call it that. It was an opinion article, so I want to get that out of the way. This is an opinion article, and it talks about Haynes King. And look, it talks about how his Heisman odds. We were checking with our partner Bet Online. They do not have him in the. They don't have him at all. Will in the Heisman odds at all. The last one's Caden Salter, Thomas Castellanos at plus 2,000, or plus 20,000. I'm sorry. So he's not even there. Like He's not even in the vicinity of that, and that might hurt people's feelings. But it kind of is what it is at this point. But a lot of people are saying, they're expecting a big 2024, and the stat that they have continued to point to is obviously the one that Georgia Tech's SID staff and communication staff and marketing continue to pump out to followers and fans and listeners all off season, towards the end of the season, all off season. It was that he was one of two players last year to put up 2,700 passing yards, 600 rushing yards, 25 touchdown passes, and 5 touchdown runs. The only other quarterback, and I've seen this ad nauseum on social media, was Jaden Daniels. Now, for a lot of people who know, I cover LSU daily. We got to watch Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels won the Heisman 2023. But let's be realistic. Jaden Daniels put up 3,812 yards passing the football last season and 40 passing touchdowns. He only had, I think it was 3 or 4 interceptions all season as well. Haynes King still had a solid season, but he put up 2,842 yards and 27 touchdown passes. So it's not really a comparison factor. When you throw that number out there, yes, it sounds good. When you throw that statement out there, but stats can be made to do whatever you want with them. You can cherry pick stats however you like to make it fit a narrative that you want. And I certainly do believe in terms of what Georgia Tech can put on the field, Haynes King can be a better quarterback. He was a good quarterback last year. But let's don't get mistaken of what happened in 2023. I'm going to say this one last time. We do not have to talk about it again unless when we start to open up the phone lines later on in this season for games, we can talk about it. Haynes King brought stability to a group that had been wandering in the wilderness for the past 4 to 5 years. Could not keep a guy healthy, could not find competent quarterback play for a decent amount of time. And so what happened was you had a room that needed a figure that could hold serve. And Haynes King did that. Was he perfect? No. Was he explosive and electric at times? Yes. So you found a competent quarterback. That's not to say he isn't good. I think he manages the offense well. I think he runs what Buster Faulkner wants to do well. And you remember, I guess it was around this time last year or before, I can't remember, we went live right after Brent Key made the announcement that Haynes King would get the start prior to that Louisville game. So I do believe that you have a room, or you have a leader that can take you to Charlotte. I said this, last week or on Tuesday night when we talked about the receivers. You have a quarterback that can take you to the level you want to get to. But the problem is that he has to either one, you're going to live and die by the gunslinging mentality, or the question has to be asked, and this comes into the development aspect, and I throw this to the crowd, throw this to the viewers and the listeners. Is Haynes King development hinging on toning things down, therefore toning the potential explosive plays? I think it's a valid question. King is I think a gunslinger. He's a guy that can be reckless at times. And at times you can also see he has the ability to take off with his legs or launch the ball down the field and create opportunistic plays for his receivers and for his playmakers. So you get the good, but you also get the bad. In 2024, are we going to see the same version, which was obviously double-digit interceptions, tied for second in the country with 16 of them? Or are you going to see him cut down on those, but does it also hurt what the production he could make? If that makes sense, like you've got a guy that can do certain things with the football, but if he turns around and tries to limit the interceptions, play a little more careful, does that hurt his ability as a playmaker and what made him good, the things that made him good in 2023? That's a storyline that I'm going to be watching. A lot of people don't want to necessarily talk about the second part of that equation, limiting what you do, because everyone would like to limit the interceptions. Like everyone would like to cut down on the mistakes. But sometimes when you do that, you have a guy that maybe puts the guardrails up. He puts the rails up on the bowling alley, and it eliminates kind of the wow factor of what he can do. That has to not be the hope that happens with Haynes King in 2024, is that he limits things while continuing to exceed and develop. That's what you want to see. My concern for 2024 and the development factor is if he cuts down on the mistakes, does that limit him as a playmaker? Because what made him good was the gunslinger and the reckless mentality. Now, a lot of things are going to be able to help, this team in 2024. We talked about it on Tuesday night. Better receiving core in terms of the guys that were there last year going to get better. The way Buster Faulkner schemes, and you can go ahead and check out that episode, whether you're listening or whether you're watching, where we talked about that. But I just think that we sit here on, August the 8th, 2024, and we have a situation of where you have a guy that's a borderline top 25 quarterback. Okay. And to push him into the category, you need a level of consistency. Now, what got Haynes King into trouble last year at times? His willingness to put the ball in tight windows. Look, when it paid off, we praised him. When it didn't pay off, or when it didn't work, it hurt. So I genuinely do believe that you have a guy that can cut down on the mistakes. But man, if he can stay with the playmaking ability and another year in the offense, logic would tell you that he's going to get better. The thing is that we sit here in August and no one can tell you that for sure. You would think another year would make you better. That's the same thing we said about Jeff Sims. And people can throw out all the excuses they want, but just because another year in the system, another year of experience, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a better football player. Experience doesn't always mean that. And Georgia Tech has been bitten by that same thought process multiple times. So that might be, you might think that's a negative viewpoint of what Haynes King brings to the table, but I also think this guy could be the best quarterback in the ACC. There's the potential for him to do that. He is a playmaker. He is still the young, talented man that made his way to Texas A&M under one of the more perceived quarterback whisperers in the country in Jimbo Fisher. Now that looks crazy at this point, but he's the same guy. Now he's wiser, he's older, and I think when you watch his tape last year, the biggest thing he has to work on, his decisiveness, ability to know where to go with the football, and when he wants to go there, to make that decision quickly and confidently. You watch at times, he's looking around trying to figure out what's going, not necessarily what's going on, but where he's going to go with the football. Decisiveness, I think, is the elusive trait that keeps him from being just a average to good quarterback to being one of the great and elite quarterbacks in college football. He's got the skill set. Look, he can run the football. He can pass the football. He has good in terms of decision making. I think he's good. It's more of the decisiveness, which is the confidence in knowing where you're going to go with the football pre-snap and while you're going through your progressions. There were times where he flashed that. There were times where people were left kind of scratching their heads of why I went there with the football. So he was good last year. He made mistakes last year. But the good news is he can be better. And a better Haynes King in 2024, well, that's exactly what Georgia Tech wants to see. So his development is massive in terms of where the Jackets want to go. I said this, like, the wide receiver room is probably the biggest wild card on this offense, maybe on the team. If the because defensively, we're going to get into that next week. Defensively, if you can just play a little bit better, this offense can win you 7-8 games by themselves. I believe that. I think that this offense, if they're better in 2024, they can win you 7 to 8 games. If the defense is better, that's where you start to get into the 8 to 9 win, maybe even 10 win if you want to get crazy about it. But, and Will, you can correct me because I believe you took this as one of yours. Georgia Tech's over-under was 5.5 or maybe just 5 flat. It was one of those numbers in 2024 per bet online, and that I'd have to go look that up again. But I think I'd take the over in that. I mean, we'll get to kind of where we're going to go, and Will says 5 flat. So we'll see how he progresses in terms of what does he bring to the table as a decision maker, as a leader of the offense. But we're going to know. You'll know week 0. Like, you're going to know very, very quickly what type of work that Haynes King put in to 2024 and the prep in the offseason. And I had a person comment on our most recent social media post about, Georgia Tech. And they said it doesn't matter. Florida State's going to win by 23. The Seminoles might very well do that. I don't know if it'll be that margin of victory, but if you can't say that a loss to Florida State in week 0, or even Haynes King's play in week 0 is indicative of entire season. King had bad games in 2023. He had great games. He needs to have more great games than bad games for Georgia Tech to have a spot in Charlotte. So that's kind of where we talk about that. Let's get to a couple of the comments real quick. Andy says, and if you're watching on X/Twitter, head over to the YouTube channel. You can find that in our profile to get your comments in. Ian says, Andy, I think it will be a rapport with the pass catchers that is as important as O-line improvement. If he trusts his team and doesn't press, then he'll be better and cut down the interceptions. Not pressing, that goes into the decisiveness factor, and that's a good that's a good comment there, Ian. John Burns says, I believe the receiving core will step it up a few notches, and that in itself will cut down the interceptions. John, I said that on Tuesday. I agree with you. John Collins, wow. All right. John Collins watching the show, former Hawks forward. No, I'm just kidding. I love the content, Bryce. I can't always join in, but I got a second. If King takes even a moderate step up and stays calm and executes, he could be nasty. Hope he finds his confidence fully. Agree with you there. John's already predicting FSU to be 0-1. Nancy, great friend of the show, Nancy, and great profile picture over there on X, says, we will be at the game in Ireland. I'm excited about seeing Haynes' leadership. Nancy, make sure you send us some pictures from that game over in Ireland. I believe a couple of our watchers and listeners are going to be over there, and it's going to be fun. But that's kind of the opening talking point, is Haynes King's development. If that is better, then you have to feel good about, oh, well, there we go. Now we're just zoomed in on my face, and there we go. Is that better, Will? We good now? We're just dealing with it live. That's what it is. Ramblin says King has a big problem of not trusting development of plays. He has to be with Buster's scheming. I agree with you. And Nancy says, oh, that she will. So Haynes King's development. Now, let's talk about the rest of this room. Folks, I've said this about the wide receiver room. I think we're entering an era of Georgia Tech football where you can say this might be one of, if not the best rosters that the Jackets have had in the past decade or more. You can probably point to a couple of years, obviously the 2014 team that went to the Orange Bowl. My favorite Georgia Tech quarterback of all time, we love Taquan Marshall here on the show, but Mr. Thomas was nasty. Probably one of the more underrated college football players of the past in the 2010s. So looking at the rest of this room, you have a very capable backup in Zach Pyron. All indications from the Pyron camp have been that obviously he wants the job. He wants to be QB1, but he understands where he's at. I think that is a healthy combination you don't see a lot of in college football nowadays. Not disgruntled, but he understands where he is. And Georgia Tech is one of the better spots in the country in terms of having a QB1 and QB2. You have a guy who played legitimate snaps as a true freshman, played it sparingly at times last year. But if something were to happen, you have a guy who's capable of winning you an ACC game. That's who Zach Pyron is. Then you continue to kind of go down, the pecking order there. Obviously, massive fan of Mr. Brody Rhodes. We don't know how he fits into the pecking order, but Brody Rhodes is a fan favorite and a favorite of the crowded booth, and Swarm Talk in general. But I will say this: when you get to the freshmen, that to me is where you kind of start to see between Graham Knowles, Aaron Philo, you've got a lot of potential there. Now, neither of those guys, you want them taking meaningful snaps this season. And I mean, like, you want them turning around, handing the football out, like football out in the fourth quarter, preserving, maybe playing their 4 games to preserve the red shirt or something like that. Because those guys are needed for your future. Georgia Tech is in an envious spot. You have the chance to stack some quarterback talent, and I am really, I really, really do like kind of where they sit. So, Philo is an athlete. I will say this, and this might be something that people want to watch, and Will, you can comment on this too. If you want to know how Aaron Philo is going to, the biggest question is he played at Prince Avenue, and how is it going to transition to Power 4 football? If you're a Georgia Tech fan, just keep an eye out on Kentucky this year. Keep an eye out on Brock Vandegrift in Kentucky. Not saying they're the same player. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying in terms of level of competition, that might be something that you just want to keep an eye on. How does he do in terms of read some of their stuff, check out a couple of their podcasts. on the Kentucky coverage side of things, because it could be something interesting to watch. Does he look like a deer in headlights his first year starting? That would be that would be that. Yeah, I love me some Brock Vandegrift. I love some Prince Avenue. Fun story for you. Ralph and I went up to Prince Avenue my junior year of high school, and we lost 52-0 to them. I think the score was 35-0 at halftime. And it was awful. It was not fun. And that's a really good high school football program, one of the lower levels in the state of Georgia. So that's where I sit with this, is that you have a talented room. You might have the best quarterback room you've had in years in terms of playable depth. You have two guys that could play for you right now. You've got some, walk-on / veteran guys. And then you've also got two young kids that are going to be able to learn, develop, and soak everything in that they need to, not only from the starters and Haynes King and those other guys, but just from, a couple of the coaches on staff. Chris Winkie, I mean, that's a great resource to have. One of the better ones you can have in the country in terms of how to play the position. Buster Faulkner, a rising OC candidate and a guy that I think Georgia Tech's going to be, having to match something, or if he has a good season, they're going to have to be matching, whether it's contract or anything like that, to keep him in the fold for next year. So I like where this quarterback room is. I think it's one of the better rooms in terms of what you could bring in the past decade. And got to be interesting to watch. It's going to be interesting to watch. I think it has a chance to be a really fun room in development. Lots of storylines. If Haynes King has a big year in 2024, which is the final thing we're going to talk about here in just a second, it's going to be something to keep an eye on, because Pyron, it feels like next year's got to be the year he starts. If not, he might look elsewhere if King decides to come back. So we'll have to see kind of what happens there. Joe the Pilot says Aaron Philo is going to be a good one. I do believe. Nancy says thankful Zach didn't transfer. Andy also says excited for Phillips' development. Very different than Haynes King for the system. And obviously he meant Philo. So let's take a look real quick, because, I mean, we've already talked about this. And I'm typing away here to make sure I have this correct. Bet Online, our partners there that'll be partnering with us and helping Will defend his championship of last year in the best bets category. They do not have Haynes King in the Heisman odds. The last one I did mention was Caden Salter, Thomas Castellanos, Baron Morton, Max Johnson, which Will's really high on. I'm not, but at 20 plus 20,000. Those are the odds. So if you want to get in on that action, you can. Haynes King, per a lot of Heisman, is like plus 50,000. Like plus, it's ridiculous. You want to make some money and you want to try to do something, throw about $10 on there and see what happens. So that's where we sit there with Bet Online. Let's get crazy. I put this in here. I believe that Will scoffed, but that's okay, because I am very interested to see how this works and how this transpires in terms of what you can do on the field in 2024. Bart says, I'm looking forward to everyone thinks on August 25th. Heisman chances. Are there legitimate Heisman chances for Haynes King? What would that have to look like? Well, we talked about that opening stat. I think you have to at least throw for 3,000 yards if you're Haynes King. I would say 3,000 to maybe 3,500 yards. You're going to have near 40 touchdowns, and you are going to have under 7 interceptions. That's what has to get you there. And I'll tell you this, if that gets you there, you're talking about a team that will be playing in Charlotte. I don't care how, what the defense looks like. You can get to Charlotte with a top 10 offense. Can Georgia Tech do that in 2024? A lot of it hinges on the shoulders of Haynes King and what he can, be for that. And John Burns says 3,000 yards. I would say, look, from a brand value perspective, like for Haynes King to win a Heisman, this is something, no one's going to ask this question in a press conference, and nor should they, because they're not going to answer it. They're going to scoff at it and give you some answer that says we're not concerned about that. And that's fine. That's okay. But if you can hit 3,500 yards, 40 touchdowns, and under 7 interceptions, and let's say you run for around 600 yards, I mean, you've accumulated nearly 4,000 yards of offense. It's going to take that. It's going to take you playing in the ACC title game and maybe winning it. It's going to take Haynes King putting Georgia Tech in a spot to be in the 12-team playoff for you to win the Heisman. So, yes, that's why it's so far-fetched, because a lot of things have to happen for Georgia Tech from a team success perspective to really get Haynes King in that mix. Because there's been some great quarterback play that has largely gone unnoticed because they've been on mediocre to bad football teams. Even if my concern is even if Georgia Tech is okay or good, I still don't think that's going to be enough. I covered the guy that won it last year. That was a 9-3 team with a defense that was worse than Georgia Tech's. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to get him Heisman consideration. Now, ACC Player of the Year, yeah, he can win that. He can win that. And for all the reasons that we talked about kind of there in the beginning of the show. So I think that I would put the Heisman chances, if you gave me a confidence score of 1 out of 10, I'm going to go 3. And that's saying this here on August the 8th. A lot of things have to go right. Georgia Tech is not a national brand. They're not a premier, they don't, power. So they're going to have ridiculous on the field success along with a crazy season from Haynes King to be able to go do that. Going to be interesting to watch, though. I don't know what that would look like. But just in terms of 2024 outlook, look, this is what should happen for this room. And we'll end it here. This is the final part of the show. So get your popcorn, sit on your couch, turn up the radio if you're listening to this throughout East Alabama and West Georgia. The 2024 outlook of this room should be you have an all ACC caliber quarterback. You've got a backup that would start at probably any group of 5 program outside of a couple that have legit dudes. Then you have 2 young kids that are going to be developed and going to battle. Maybe one transfers out after a year or 2, but you're going to have a legitimate quarterback battle there. So the health of this room is amazing. When Brent Key got to Georgia Tech, okay, way back when, under the previous regime, you couldn't say this about the quarterback room. You were trying to figure it out. 4 years later, when Brent Key took over as the interim, Zach Gibson and Tyson Pumachan scared Georgia at halftime of that game. And credit to Key, credit to Buster Faulkner, and credit to Chris Winkie for recruiting, stacking, and having roster retention in this room to make it one of the conference's best. Now, from a pure talent standpoint, outside looking in from college football media, they may not say that. But I do believe that this is a group that could be one of the more talented in terms of guys 1 through 4 on the depth chart of who you could throw out there. Georgia Tech is an envy of a quarterback room right now. You have Haynes King, who's a legitimate college football starter. You got Zach Pyron, who's very serviceable and can go win you some football games. And I think a lot of people would feel comfortable putting him in a situation were something to happen to Haynes King. But credit to this coaching staff, because it's not easy. Those are not easy conversations to have. Not easy things to go about when talking about where this program can go and what can happen. But credit to them. They did it in an era that's very rare. They made it mean something to be at Georgia Tech, and I think that's huge. I think it's a big reason why this room can have success and a big reason why they're laying the foundation of not just to have success in 2024, but 25, 26, 27, when, it becomes the money-making years for Brent Key. It's no longer someone else's guys. It's your guys, and it's your program. That's what you're going to be graded on. But I'm very high on this quarterback room. I don't want to say I'm drinking the Kool-Aid of a lot of the fan base wanting to, say this is an 8-9 win team, but it's definitely possible. And it all starts with the guy under center and Haynes King, and I think he's a legitimate dude. I think he's going to turn some eyebrows, and I will say this. I think that Georgia Tech can surprise some folks, and I'm just going to tease it. I think they can surprise some folks in Ireland in about 2 weeks, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get to a couple of the final comments. Joe the Pilot says, I would agree with a 3. Andy says, 40 tuds. We're playing in Atlanta. Not sure what that means. John Burns says, winning ain't free. Send a check, even if it's only $100. We need 40,000 fans sending a check every quarter. That would be $16 million annually. Hey, how about you just donate to the stream? How about you do that? That would also be great. Donate to the Crowded Booth, and we would love it. Andy says, Zach Gibson starting against UGA 2 years ago. That's crazy. Nancy Pye said, couldn't say that about anything at GT under the last regime. Key and staff working hard to make GT great again. I agree. Andy says the program has exceeded my and probably everybody's expectation in the offseason. Let's hope it pans out. Yeah, it's time for those things to show up. And then Jack ends it with, we'll end it right here. Will Haynes run more or less this year? I think you would want him to run less out of necessity. It means that the offense is super balanced. but he's going to pick his moments and be a weapon. That's where I think he could be. Pick his moments and be a legitimate weapon. That's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks so much for tuning in, talking about the quarterbacks. And just a couple things. If you have not already, you can click down in the bio over on YouTube or in the description on YouTube. And whether it's on podcast through our partners through the Believe Network, we're pumped to be a part of them and doing what we're doing over there. Keep showing the love. Just, look, even if you watch the content, head over to Apple Podcasts, to Spotify, wherever you might be getting this, and check us out. Just hit follow. You don't even have to listen, but hit follow, download the episodes, and listen to us sometimes. It makes our lives easier, and it obviously helps us do what we're going to do as well. And for Georgia Tech fans, do not forget, August 31st, myself, Will Mannis, and Ralph Larry are going to be in the building on campus as Georgia Tech hosts Georgia State for the official start of college football. They're going to play Florida State the week before, but we're going to get that week 1 matchup, a Battle of Atlanta. We're going to be doing a live show. We're going to have some giveaways. We're going to have some food. So make sure you come by the tailgate. Location TBD. We're going to be releasing that through a graphic and some content as well over the next week or two, but can't wait for you to be a part of that, and it's going to be a lot of fun. My name is Bryce Koon. Will Mannis in the background. This is Swarm Talk, brought to you by the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth.